The capstone asks you to integrate theory into your public relations plan or case study, the theory behind why certain things work. It's important to know how communication theory can serve as a critical tool in your practice of public relations. It adds a supportive dimension to your problem-solving recommendations, because theory goes beyond description to prediction. In a case study, theory is explanatory. Why did something succeed or fail? In a communication plan, theory is visionary, telling us what should guide our strategies for success. Let's first look at three types of theory. Common sense theory is often created by your own personal experiences or helpful hints passed on from family members or friends. Working theory are generalizations made in certain professions. They're more systematic than common sense because they're agreed upon ways of doing things. For example, writing a news story in a certain format to signal what's important, or shooting a film with a specific camera shot to evoke specific emotions. Scholarly theory, what we're talking about today, is also useful for people in business or the communication professions because it has undergone systematic research, providing more thorough and accurate explanations. Public relations strategies are based on theories from many areas. I'll share with you some simple examples of the most likely theories you might be considering, and if one or two strike you as relevant to your plan or case, make a note of it and do some further research. My comments in this lecture are, by necessity, abbreviating. Certain contexts and conditions may make these theories stronger or weaker, but by reviewing select theories now, it should help you build your understanding of how to use theory in your practice. You were first introduced to communication and public relations theory early in your program, in PR Principles and Practices and in Advanced Writing, theories such as framing and the excellence model. In later courses, you likely covered ethical perspectives and marketing and political theories, for example, persuasion, which really has its roots in psychology. Many different theories can be applied to strategic communication. Most students in the capstone course choose just one or two theories that support their project's goal and objectives. For your purposes with the capstone plan or case study, and for succeeding in your own professional PR careers, knowing the theoretical grounding for communication strategies can make you more analytical and also empower you to think bigger, make bolder plans, craft stronger messages, and proceed with confidence. Already in this program's courses, you probably talked about the role of political opinion in democratic theory, the impact of values, and the process of political socialization. The process by which people view their engagement in politics and acquire and maintain their political attitudes, biases, beliefs, in short, their public opinions. You read about what people learn, how they learn it, and how they reinforce or alter what they've learned. So how might the theory of political socialization guide you in harnessing the media's power to shape the views and behaviors of key audiences? This campaign works to reinforce the idea that bullying is not acceptable. In fact, as their tagline says, it sucks. In the theory of political socialization, different agents in a society influence others to believe in a certain way. This campaign uses a couple different agents to communicate its message. The first agent is mass media social networks. By framing the issue of cyberbullying through this medium, targeted publics will be influenced. Also, the campaign will spread through likes, hashtags, and retweets, suggesting that another socialization agent is a peer group. If people see their friends are against cyberbullying, they may become less likely to bully through the internet. So let's look at what's most commonly used in PR. Media and mass communication related models, persuasion related models, and management and culture related models. Media and mass communication theories concern the sender, the message, and the audience via various forms including traditional TV, radio, newspapers, and more recently film, music, and all the new communication technologies. We'll briefly introduce 4 theories here: agenda setting, two-step flow, diffusion and adoption, and uses and gratifications. Once we look at examples, you'll recognize them in your own media experiences. Agenda setting theory is widely tested in experimental research. It states that traditional news media have a large influence on audiences by their media's choice of what stories to consider newsworthy and how much prominence and space to give them. Thus, the media determine for the public what to think about and how to think about it. There's a lot of research on the usefulness of this theory and its connection with media relations efforts. However, are the news media always influencers of public opinion? A strong tradition of critical literature suggests that the news media are really an imperfect lens with some publics sometimes. Actually, alternative media, advertising, film, entertainment, TV, radio, and music may have greater effect than through the news. But no matter the conduit, when the content is no longer user-created, there is always a gatekeeper author that you turn your story over to, who then controls the story, sets the agenda for what your audience hears or reads. Here's a student example. In a campaign plan for the U.S. Secret Service, students applied agenda setting to their strategy to change the tone of media coverage by driving specific messages that media relay to the public. So, tell me, what is framing? You studied it. The word mastery of Frank Luntz, the Republican strategist who skillfully renamed global warming as the much more benign climate change. And in the attack mode, why was his phrase, death taxes, more effective than estate taxes in persuading Americans and eventually Congress to reduce estate taxes? Framing is the careful choice of words, imagery, sound, motion, or any rhetorical device to influence a certain meaning. And that makes it also a persuasion theory as well. A past capstone plan that concerned Sprint applied framing theory to its strategy of portraying the offer of their competitor, Verizon, not as a deal, but really as quite an expense for consumers and businesses. The media can also influence key spokespeople, experts, and leaders, early adopters of new ideas who then influence certain groups of publics. Two-step flow theory asserts that information from the media moves in 2 distinct stages. First, individuals, opinion leaders, who pay close attention to the mass media and its messages, they receive the information. These opinion leaders then pass on their own interpretations in addition to the actual media content. The term personal influence was coined to refer to the process intervening between the media's direct message and the audience's ultimate reaction to that message. Opinion leaders are quite influential in getting people to change their attitudes and behaviors. This project applied two-step flow to a campaign to recover, reclaim, and sustain a failing college by influencing community opinion leaders to then influence other publics. Diffusion and adoption theory draws from marketing psychology, holding that an idea or product must pass through a sequential process with the public to ultimately adopt it. It's an extension of the two-step flow theory because this theory has a 6-step process: awareness, knowledge, evaluation, trial, adoption, and reinforcement. Research shows that a public's response to a certain persuasive appeal that calls for behavior change depends on where the audience lies in the diffusion process, and note the steps that must be accomplished before you reach trial. Here's a public relations campaign for rebranding the Chevy Volt that's guided by principles of diffusion and adoption, because a reorientation process was needed after its disastrous rollout. In this plan to end human trafficking, Students used agenda setting to guide their media relations strategy, identifying various media as key in informing and influencing certain publics. But due to complexities discovered in their research, the students also understood that a process was needed to guide select publics through necessary steps. Thus, diffusion theory helped shape strategies toward achieving the plan's end goal. Uses and gratifications theory suggests that media users play an active role in choosing and using the media. They're goal-oriented. I'm sure you can relate to that. A media user seeks out a source that best fulfills his or her needs. Uses and grats, as we call it, assumes that the user has alternate choices to satisfy the need. When it was first developed, the theory defined 4 types of need. Diversion: the media fills the need to escape everyday life, to relax. Personal relationships: we use media to fulfill our needs for companionship and to form relationships with others. Personal identity: we tend to use media to find out about ourselves. People profiled may reflect our desires, needs, fantasies, secrets. And surveillance: we use media to find out what's going on around us. Now, with changes in technologies and consumer use, recent research has identified even more needs. So for a strategic campaign planner, the application is clear. Determine the needs of your target public and address them using appropriate tactics and mediums. For example, if your target are millennials and the topic is a certain type of music, the media might be an online zine or a festival's website. Now let's turn to persuasion. Persuasion is typically defined as human communication that is designed to influence others by modifying their beliefs, values, attitudes, or behaviors. So now we'll introduce 4 persuasion theories: ELM, image restoration, inoculation, and Robert Cialdini's influence principles. So take a look at this cartoon for a minute. What's happening here? One diner has made a very deliberate decision, and the other diner appears not to be thinking at all. How can elaboration likelihood model help us make sense of this? This is a major persuasion theory. It states that persuasive messages are received by publics through 2 different routes, either the central route or the peripheral route. Via the central route, one's mental processing is based on thought, analysis, reflection. Via the peripheral route, one's processing is based on mental shortcuts, little effort. Via the central route, because one's mental processing is based on thought, analysis, reflection, attitudes formed are more persistent and resistant to change. Active thinking internalizes the message. Some publics are central processors by nature, so when addressing them, it's extremely important that your argument have cognitive strength. Via the peripheral route, one's processing is based on mental shortcuts, little effort. Attitudes formed are very short-lived. With the crescendo of chatter in our world today, most messages are processed this way. Although the listener may immediately change an attitude, it is not long-lasting. However, for us as communication strategists, if the central route to processing is more likely to stick and affect attitude and behavior change, we need to know how to motivate the central route. And there are 2 ways. First, increase your listener or your public's motivation to engage. How do you do this? Explain why it is relevant that they engage. Explain how it affects the receiver personally. And second, increase their ability to engage. Adapt to the receiver's level of understanding and experience. And here, you must know your audience to adapt to them, and also eliminate distractions. The results should be your listeners will actively listen about the message, and they will be more likely to change their attitude. The military one-source communication plan uses ELM to guide its strategies and tactics, seeking to change attitudes on PTSD in service members and their families. Many capstone projects deal with some type of issue management or crisis situation. A helpful theory to judge or recommend an organization's response is William Benoit's image restoration theory. It suggests 5 strategies of response. Many case studies have applied Benoit's theory to damaging situations involving celebrities, politicians, and corporations. In a political or really any competitive situation, here's a theory that we might call a weapon of influence. Inoculation builds resistance to persuasive messages. It's based on the metaphor of a medical inoculation or vaccination. The theory says that if you give your audience a small dose of your opponent's argument, and then you immediately provide a counter-argument, that triggers a process of counter-arguing by the audience members themselves on their own, which eventually makes them resistant to later, stronger persuasive messages from your opponent. Think about that. Dr. Robert Cialdini of Arizona State University researched 6 principles of influence. The first is liking. His studies showed that people tend to say yes to those they like. There are various components of liking: repeated contact, similarity, flattery, and physical attractiveness, also called the halo effect. Second is the principle of consistency. The need for it directs human action. It's the desire to be and to appear to be in agreement, in harmony, compatible with who we think we are or what we've already done. Once we make a choice or take a stand, we encounter personal and interpersonal pressures to behave consistently with that commitment. A strategist seeking influence might consider the power of this highly valued consistency principle. Now, reciprocity refers to the drive to respond to another's positive action with your own positive action, rewarding. It also can be used persuasively, and it is a principle behind negotiating with concessions. Next, there are various explanations for group conformity, and it can be a very powerful weapon of influence. When the fact that everyone's doing it influences behavior, Cialdini calls it social proof. Next is authority. Most cultures have a sense of duty to it. Our obedience to authority often takes place with little determination and makes so much sense to us that we comply when it doesn't make much sense at all. It's automatic. This principle can be used persuasively. Consider the visual trappings of authority: clothing, status symbols, titles, etc. Last, the principle of scarcity. It accounts for people's behavior when confronted with limited numbers, time, opportunities, and loss in general. We want something more when there's less of it. And did you know that we are more motivated by the prospect of losing something than we are motivated by the prospect of gaining something of equal value? In fact, we react against any interference by wanting and trying to possess the item more than we did before. Helping the NFL manage its crisis with traumatic brain injury, this campaign applies all 6 of Cialdini's influence principles. Now, I want to briefly cover management and culture to wrap this up. Management theories consider input from and relationships with various stakeholders, not just top-down messages from the organization. Cultural theories take cultural differences into consideration in communication situations. James Grunig's excellence theory is a major PR theory. An organization's good relationships with its strategic publics helps it develop and achieve goals desired by both the organization and the publics. It reduces costs of negative publicity, and it increases revenue by providing needed products and services. So, to maximize value of public relations, a campaign must identify strategic publics and build long-term relationships with them through symmetrical two-way communication programs, thus an extensive use of social media dialoguing today. Organizations that embrace this theory place public relations professionals in a critical management function. In this student campaign plan, the Port of Houston Authority confronted alleged misconduct, negative media attention, and a state investigation. The students chose excellence theory to create public organization relationships through social media community outreach and educational efforts. Finally, communicating within the diversity of today's global landscape requires cultural literacy. And one prominent source that helps explain how culture shapes and is shaped by communication is Hofstede's theory of cultural dimensions. If your project has an international aspect, be sure to take a look at his website. In closing, I would like to urge you to concentrate on the categories of theory most frequently used in public relations: theories of media and mass communication, theories of persuasion, and theories of management and culture.